On the day I got out, two people were waiting at the gate. One was my fiancée, Sophia Kane, the industry's youngest female CEO of a publicly traded company. The other was my sister, Lucy. 5 years ago, they personally sent me to prison. Sophia wore a black coat, standing ramrod straight, as if she were here to pick someone up. My sister kept her head down, not daring to even look at me. Ethan. Her voice was tight. I ignored her. A black Maybach was parked by the curb. I got straight in. I'd been hearing that sound, the iron gate closing behind me, for 5 years. Hearing it from inside versus hearing it from outside, it wasn't the same. The sunlight was blinding. I squinted, standing at the prison entrance, taking a deep breath. The air smelled of dust, mixed with greasy smoke drifting from a roadside barbecue stand. 5 years. I'd almost forgotten that smell. I carried a clear plastic bag containing the phone, wallet, and stopwatch I'd had on me the day I went in. The phone had long since died. The wallet still held $320, along with a photo of Sophia. I pulled out the photo, glanced at it, and shoved it into a nearby trash can. Then I looked up and saw them. Sophia stood on the opposite sidewalk wearing a black cashmere coat, her hair pulled into a flawless bun, makeup immaculate, feet in stiletto heels. She stood perfectly straight, expression calm, like she was picking up a colleague returning from a business trip. No, even more indifferent than that. Lucy stood beside her. She was thinner than 5 years ago. Face pale, head down, fingers twisted together, knuckles red. She didn't dare look at me. I had no desire to look at her either. Sophia spoke first. She called out across the street. Ethan. Her voice wasn't loud, but loud enough for me to hear clearly. It carried a kind of condescending composure. I didn't respond. I was looking at the car parked by the curb. A black Maybach. I didn't recognize the license plate, but I recognized the business card pressed under the windshield. 3 words in gold embossing, Sterling Whitmore. The old man had kept his word. Ethan. Lucy finally raised her head, voice tight, eyes reddening. She took half a step forward then stopped. 5 years ago in court, she hadn't worn that expression. Back then she'd stood in the witness box, voice clear and composed, systematically nailing her own brother to the defendant's seat sentence by sentence. I saw with my own eyes that Ethan attacked someone. After the victim fell, he kept kicking. Every word had been a nail. I'd looked at her then. She'd looked back. Her gaze had flickered for 1 second. Just 1 second. Then she'd looked away and continued with her rehearsed testimony, sending me to prison. And now she stood at the prison gate, head bowed, saying Ethan. As I walked past her, I caught the scent of her perfume. Expensive. 5 years ago she'd used 99-cent floral water from the supermarket. Apparently that $50,000 had served her well. I didn't stop, heading straight for the Maybach. Sophia's expression changed. She hurried across the street, heels clicking urgently on the asphalt. Ethan, wait. I pulled open the car door. Ethan, I need to talk to you. I bent down and slid into the back seat. The car had a faint sandalwood scent. The leather seats were warm from the sun. A man in his 50s sat in the passenger seat, salt and pepper hair, wearing a dark gray mandarin collar suit, back perfectly straight. He turned to look at me and nodded slightly. Mr. Hayes, my name is George. Mr. Whitmore arranged for me to wait here for you before he passed. He took a black document bag from the glove box and handed it over with both hands. Everything Mr. Whitmore left for you is here. I took it and unzipped the bag. Inside was a stack of documents. On top was a will with a notary seal still visible. I flipped to the second page and saw a string of numbers. My fingers paused. Then I closed the document bag and looked out the window. Sophia still stood beside the car, bent over, one hand tapping the window, mouth opening and closing. Through the glass, I couldn't hear what she was saying. I didn't need to. Let's go, I said. George started the engine. The Maybach pulled smoothly away from the curb, gliding past Sophia. In the rearview mirror, her hand hung suspended in midair, body frozen. Lucy chased after us for a few steps, then stopped and crouched by the roadside, hands covering her face. I pulled my gaze back, leaned against the seat, and closed my eyes. 5 years. 1,826 days. Every single day inside, I thought about one thing. Not revenge. Accounting. Who owed me what? How much? How to calculate the interest. Now the ledger was open. Time to collect. The Maybach stopped in front of a luxury apartment building in the East District. The elevator went straight to the top floor. When the doors opened, the entire floor was the apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked half the city's skyline. The setting sun turned all the glass facades golden. In the center of the living room sat an unopened bottle of premium liquor, with a letter beside it. The envelope read, for Ethan. Sterling Whitmore's handwriting. The strokes were still strong, but the line endings showed slight tremors. He'd written this in his final months. I didn't rush to open the letter. First I sat down and spread the contents of the document bag across the table one by one. George stood beside me, poured me a cup of tea, then began explaining each item. The Overseas Trust Fund for Summit Holdings. 35% equity stake, current market value approximately $120 billion. This equity is held through a 3-tier offshore structure. Mr. Whitmore's biological son, Sebastian, still has no idea this asset exists. I flipped to the next page. Switzerland, Singapore, and the Cayman Islands. 17 accounts total across all 3 locations. Cash and equivalents totaling approximately $38 billion. Next page. Prime commercial real estate in 11 locations across major cities. Estimated value approximately $26 billion. George finished listing these figures and paused. Mr. Hayes, your current personal assets are conservatively estimated at over $180 billion. I picked up the teacup and took a sip. 3 years ago, on the metal bunk in prison, he coughed so hard his whole body curled into a ball. I'd put my own blanket over him and gone to the infirmary to get him cough medicine. Back then, no one paid him any attention. A 70-something old man, hair completely white, gaunt, hunched over, voice weak when he spoke. Everyone assumed he was just an ordinary fraud convict. He didn't explain. I didn't ask. I just gave him half my egg at every meal. When he coughed, I got him hot water. When someone gave him trouble, I stood in front of him. No particular reason. I just felt an old man shouldn't be treated that way. Half a year later, one evening, he suddenly spoke to me. Ethan, why did they send you here? I told him what had happened. My business partner set me up. My fiancée betrayed me. My sister gave false testimony. He listened in silence for a long time, then said one sentence. My son did the same to me. Later I learned that Sterling Whitmore was the founder of Summit Holdings. Self-made. 40 years building a street corner workshop into a $100 billion commercial empire. Then his own son Sebastian, working with board members, forged a psychiatric evaluation, and on grounds of senile dementia and incompetence, sent him to prison. The charge was embezzlement. All evidence fabricated. Just like mine. We shared that cell for 3 years. He taught me to read financial reports, analyze business models, speak the language of capital. 3 months before he died, he called in his overseas lawyers. One by one, he transferred every hidden asset Sebastian didn't know about into my name. Ethan, I have no other requests. He lay on the infirmary bed, gripping my hand. His strength was already fading. Take this money. Live a good life. As for Sebastian, he paused. His eyes held no hatred, only weariness. Help him if you want. Or don't. Either way. The night he died, heavy rain fell outside. I sat by his bed the entire night. That was the first time I cried after going to prison. Also the last. After that, I no longer needed tears. What I needed was patience. The first night after my release, I sat in the living room of this apartment and had George pull up everything about Derek Ford and Sophia from the past 5 years. Derek Ford, my former business partner, now CEO of Ford Tech, a company on the verge of going public, built on the core algorithm I'd written years ago. Sophia Kane, my former fiancée, married Derek, leveraged the Ford family resources to start her own PR firm, and took it public. The industry's youngest female CEO, she loved that title. 5 years ago she slapped me, then climbed into Derek's car using my dignity as a stepping stone. Now she had fame and fortune, living a glamorous life. While I'd spent 5 years eating moldy bread in prison, George handed me a detailed financial analysis report. Mr. Hayes, Ford Tech's largest client is Summit Cloud Data, a Summit Holdings subsidiary. Annual orders around $800 million, representing 42% of Ford's total revenue. 42%. I smiled slightly. Tomorrow set up a dinner meeting with whoever's in charge at Summit Cloud Data. George nodded. Also, I set down my teacup. What's the biggest supplier for Sophia's PR firm? Stellar Media. Also owned by Summit. Schedule that meeting too. I stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city's lights spread out below me, dense, scattered, countless points of light. 5 years ago when I was ripped from this city, I'd taken nothing with me. Now I was back, with $180 billion, and a very long bill to collect. 3 days after my release, Sophia called me. The number was newly changed. After I'd charged my old phone, her number had come through. Ethan, let's meet up. There are some things we need to discuss in person. Her tone was flat, even carrying a hint of condescension. I said fine. She chose the location, East Lake Manor, the most expensive private restaurant in the city. When I arrived, 2 people were already sitting in the private room. Sophia occupied the head seat, wearing a dove gray suit dress, pearl earrings, perfect lipstick. Derek Ford sat beside her. 5 years later, the man had gained a good 20 pounds. His suit stretched tight, a Patek Philippe on his wrist, wedding ring on his left ring finger. Seeing me enter, he didn't stand, just lifted his chin and pointed to the chair across from him. Sit. One word. I sat. Sophia spoke first, voice unhurried. Ethan, you're out. That's good. The past is the past. She pushed a document toward me. These are your original shares in the company. After you went in, we did an equity restructuring. Your shares were diluted. This document needs your personal signature for confirmation. I opened the document and looked. I'd originally held 35% of Ford Tech as co-founder. In this document, my shares had become 0.3%. The company was currently valued at $5 billion. 0.3% meant $15 million. Derek spoke up, legs crossed, spinning a pen between his fingers. Brother, keeping those shares safe for you these 5 years hasn't been easy. The company has hundreds of people to feed. R&D, marketing, fundraising. Everything burns money. Having your 35% sitting there inactive affected our fundraising valuation. When he said brother, the corner of his mouth lifted. This $15 million, Sophia and I discussed it. Honestly, it's not bad. You get out, take this money, rent a place, open a small shop. You can make it work. Sophia picked up the thread, tone gentle but every word laced with barbs. Ethan, I know you might feel uncomfortable, but you have to face reality. Your current situation, someone with a criminal record, returning to the workplace, it's difficult. This money will at least help you transition. She even smiled. Of course, if you need any help, Derek and I can make some introductions through our network. The room fell silent for 2 seconds. Outside the window, bamboo leaves rustled in the wind. Derek's pen spun rapidly between his fingers, metal glinting reflections on the ceiling. I kept my head down, reading the document, turning page by page. Where's the pen? I said. Sophia froze for a moment. Then undisguised satisfaction crossed her face. She handed over a Mont Blanc. Here, page 3 and the last page. Signature and date. I took the pen. Derek leaned forward, eyes fixed on my hand. I signed. Name, date, stroke by stroke. Then I put the pen down and stood. Text me the wire transfer information. I turned and walked out. Behind me came Derek's laughter, voice lowered but loud enough for me to hear. See? I told you. 5 years and the can breaks a man. Sophia didn't laugh, but she didn't stop Derek's laughter either. Silence was consent. I pushed open the door and stepped into the corridor. At the corner, I stopped, pulled out my phone and dialed. George. Mr. Hayes. Is Summit Cloud data settled? Settled. All of Ford Tech's orders for next quarter have been cancelled. Reason given is strategic direction adjustment. Stellar Media also confirmed they'll stop supplying all media resources to Kane PR starting next week. Good. I hung up and pocketed my phone. Walking out of the restaurant, night wind hit my face. Cool. 15 million. They wanted to buy out my 35% stake for 15 million. Buy out 5 years of imprisonment. Buy out all the rights of a business partner, a fiancé, a brother. 15 million. I exhaled softly. Derek was right. It really wasn't bad. Enough for him to regret it for the rest of his life. The next 2 weeks, I did nothing. More precisely, I didn't personally do anything. Week 1, Ford Tech received formal notice from Summit Cloud Data that all next quarter collaborations were terminated. 800 million in orders, gone just like that. Derek blew up the phone of the Summit Cloud Data executive. The response, corporate strategic adjustment. Not my decision. Same week, Ford Tech's partner bank suddenly began reviewing loan qualifications. 3 loans totaling 200 million were demanded for early repayment. Reason, risk assessment anomaly. Derek panicked. He started reaching out everywhere, calling in favors, treating people to meals. But he discovered something strange. The business contacts who usually called him brother were suddenly all busy. No answer on calls. No reply to messages. Secretaries blocking. Week 2 was worse. 3 of Ford Tech's core technical staff resigned simultaneously. These 3 managed the company's most critical algorithm architecture. The system I'd written 5 years ago. Without them, projects ground to a halt. Derek exploded. He smashed a laptop in his office and screamed at the CTO for 40 straight minutes. George told me all this. Summit's intelligence network covered every corner of this city's business world. Derek couldn't escape this net. Sophia wasn't doing much better. After Stellar Media cut her off, her PR firm lost 60% of its media channels in one stroke. Several major clients' annual PR campaigns couldn't be executed. Penalty fees accumulated to $40 million. She scrambled for replacement suppliers, but in this industry, Stellar was the absolute leader. Other firms were either too small to handle the volume or quoted triple the price. Sophia's complexion worsened day by day. One of her employees told George's people over drinks that Ms. Kane had been working until 2 or 3 a.m. every night, temperamental, firing 2 assistants in a row. I listened to all this while sipping tea. Did Derek figure anything out? He hired a business investigation firm, but all leads point to strategic adjustments within Summit Holdings. No one's pointed at you. What about Sophia? She's more perceptive than Derek. Had lunch with a friend 2 days ago and mentioned the timing seemed suspicious. She suspects me? For about 1 second. Then she dismissed it herself. Her exact words were, he's just some guy who spent 5 years in prison and signed away 15 million without a fight. How could he have that kind of pull? I laughed. Continue. George handed me another document. Mr. Hayes, someone's been buying up Ford Tech shares on the secondary market. At the current pace, in another 2 weeks the stake will approach the disclosure threshold. Who's buying? The 3 shell companies you had me set up. I flipped to the last page. A line of numbers. Ford Tech's stock price had dropped from $38 per share last month to $29. Negative news plus major client losses. Market confidence collapsed fast. The more it fell, the more I bought. The more I bought, the more Derek panicked. Friday evening of week 2, Derek's assistant called me. Mr. Hayes, Mr. Ford would like to invite you to dinner tomorrow. To catch up. 10 times more polite than 2 weeks ago. I said. No thanks. I'm busy. Then hung up. That evening I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, holding the seal Sterling had left me. Soapstone. Cool heavy. For characters carved on it. Immovable as mountains. Sterling had said that in business, the most important thing isn't acting fast. It's staying calm. I put the seal back in its box and turned off the lights. Outside, 10,000 lights. Among them, one belonged to Derek's home. I guessed he wouldn't sleep tonight. 4th week after release, Lucy found me. She somehow discovered where I lived. Maybe she tracked the Maybach's license plate. Maybe bribed the security guard. Either way, she came. 3 p.m. George called my intercom. Mr. Hayes, your sister is in the lobby downstairs. Security's blocking her. She won't leave. I was silent for 5 seconds. Let her up. When the doorbell rang, I sat on the living room sofa with a Summit Holdings quarterly report spread before me. The door opened. Lucy stood in the doorway stunned. Her gaze swept from the marble entryway floor to the crystal chandelier, from the cityscape beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows to the unopened liquor bottle on the coffee table. Her mouth opened then closed. Come in and talk. I didn't look up. She entered, standing across from the sofa, both hands clutching her purse strap, knuckles white. Ethan, there's a problem with the house. Of course. 3 weeks ago I'd had George arrange for lawyers to file a property rights dispute on that house. That house was left by our parents, with both my and Lucy's names on it. After I went to prison, Sophia used authorized disposal to transfer my half of the property rights to Lucy's name. For a price, naturally. The price was that false testimony in court. Now the property rights were disputed. My lawyers filed for a freeze on grounds of unauthorized action by unauthorized party, invalid agency. Lucy panicked. That house was her only asset in this city. Ethan, the property rights issue, was that you? Her voice grew quieter until the last words were nearly inaudible. I set down the report, looked up at her. 5 years later, Lucy was much thinner. Sunken eye sockets, prominent cheekbones, no flesh on her face. But she wore a jade bracelet on her wrist and a gold necklace. Poor but vanity intact. That's why you came? Ethan, that house is what Mom and Dad left for us. You can't. Left for us. I repeated it. 5 years ago in court, what did you say? You said you saw with your own eyes that I deliberately hurt someone. Did you know that person was hired by Derek for $20,000 to act? Lucy's face went white. Do you know that because of your testimony, the judge added 2 years to my sentence? Her lips trembled. She couldn't speak. It should have been 3 years. Because of the eyewitness supplementary testimony, it became 5. Those extra 2 years were a gift from you. I stood and walked toward her. She backed up a step, lower back hitting the chair. That $50,000, is it spent yet? At those words, Lucy's tears fell. She crouched on the floor, hands covering her face, shoulders shaking. Ethan, I know I was wrong. I didn't know then. Sophia told me you'd just be in for a few months. Said you'd get out soon. I didn't know the sentence would be so long. Didn't know. I crouched down to her eye level. Lucy, you didn't not know. You didn't want to know. 50,000 plus a house. You thought it was worth it. As for how many years your brother spent inside, that wasn't your concern. She cried harder, snot and tears covering her face. Ethan, please, that house is all I have. I really don't have anything else. I stood, stepped back. Leave. Ethan. I said leave. I turned and walked back to the sofa, picking up the report again. Lucy stood behind me for a long time. Her crying gradually quieted. Finally she wiped her face and walked toward the door on unsteady legs. At the door she paused. Ethan, this apartment, where you're living, where did you get the money? I didn't answer. The door closed. George emerged from the study, glancing at me. Mr. Hayes, are you all right? I turned to the next page of the report. When's the next move? George checked his watch. Ford Tech stock price dropped another 4% today. According to plan, we can issue a takeover bid next Monday. Change it. Sir. Wait until next month's business summit. Announce it in front of everyone. George paused, then nodded. Understood. The rain in this city always came without warning. By the 3rd week of November, the sky had turned the color of wet slate, throwing a gray chill over the financial district. In the high-rise offices of Ford Tech, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of cheap coffee and the low, persistent hum of server racks that were running out of data to process. Derek Ford stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his executive suite, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up to his forearms. On his desk, 3 mobile phones sat silent, a stark contrast to the frantic buzzing that had characterized his mornings just a month ago. Still nothing. Derek didn't turn around. His voice was hoarse, the product of 2 weeks of sleepless nights and too many cigarettes. Behind him, his chief financial officer, a man named Marcus who had aged 10 years and 10 days, adjusted his glasses. The consortium of banks has officially declined our request for a grace period on the short-term loan. They are citing a breach of our debt-to-equity ratio covenants. If we don't liquidate $40 million by Friday at 5 p.m., they will declare a technical default. 40 million, Derek muttered, a bitter laugh escaping his throat. We had 80 million in liquid reserves last quarter before Summit Cloud data pulled the plug. Where did the cash go? The R&D department's transition to the new server infrastructure, Marcus said quietly, and the advanced marketing campaigns Kane PR ran for us. We paid them. Upfront, Derek. $10 million. Derek closed his eyes. Sophia. In the early days of their marriage, her PR firm had been a convenient vehicle to funnel corporate funds, legitimizing their personal wealth while boosting Ford Tech's brand. Now those transactions were anchors pulling them both down. And the stock? Derek asked. It opened at $23 this morning, Marcus replied, his voice barely a whisper. We've lost 40% of our market capitalization in 18 days. Someone is shorting us heavily, Derek. But it's not just institutional shorts. There is a quiet, steady accumulation of physical shares happening through secondary brokerages in Hong Kong and Singapore. Whoever they are, they're buying every block of stock that panicked retail investors dump. A hostile takeover, Derek said, the word tasting like copper in his mouth. Who has that kind of liquidity? Who wants a mid-cap software company that's about to lose its primary patent license? We don't know, Marcus said. The holding companies are registered in Grand Cayman. The ultimate beneficial owners are hidden behind a wall of nominee directors. Derek turned around, his eyes bloodshot. Get out. When Marcus left, closing the heavy oak door behind him, Derek reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a bottle of scotch. He didn't bother with a glass. Took a long drag, his hand shaking slightly. He was 34. He had a penthouse in the West District, a Maybach, a wife, who was on the cover of Forbes Asia, and a company that was supposed to make him a billionaire before he turned 40. Now he felt like a man standing on a trapdoor, waiting for the rope to tighten. His personal phone rang. The screen displayed Sophia. He answered on the third ring. What? We need to talk. Sophia's voice was crisp, but there was a tremor in it that she couldn't quite mask. The board of Kane PR just held an emergency meeting. 2 of our independent directors resigned this morning. They said our association with Ford Tech's current financial instability is a fiduciary liability. They resigned? Derek sneered. They were your friends, Sophia. You handpicked them. In business, Derek, there are no friends, she said coldly. Only balance sheets. Stellar Media has officially blacklisted us. We can't secure prime time slots for our clients. We're losing the luxury brand accounts. If Ford Tech defaults on Friday, Kane PR goes down with you. We need to liquidate our personal assets. Liquidate what? Derek raised his voice. The house. The villa in Tuscany? The art collection? If we start selling now, the market will know we're desperate. The stock will plummet to single digits by tomorrow afternoon. Then what do you propose we do? Sophia demanded. Sit here and watch 5 years of work turn to ash? There is one option, Derek said, his voice dropping to a low, desperate register. Sebastian Whitmore. A long silence stretched over the line. Sebastian. Sophia said, her tone cautious. The CEO of Summit Holdings? Doesn't take meetings with companies our size. He does if we offer him what he wants, Derek said, leaning against his desk. Summit Holdings has been trying to build their own proprietary cloud architecture for 3 years. They're behind schedule. Our core algorithm, the one Ethan wrote, is still the most efficient data routing system on the market. If we offer Sebastian a majority stake in Ford Tech at a discount, he can integrate our tech into Summit Cloud. He saves his project and we get the protection of the largest conglomerate in the country. And what about Ethan's shares? Sophia asked. The 0.3% he signed over? That's already in the treasury pool, Derek said, a grim smile returning to his face. The transfer was processed last week. Ethan is out of the picture. He's probably in some cheap motel in the suburbs, spending his $15 million on cheap liquor and self-pity. He doesn't matter anymore. I don't like it, Sophia said. It feels too easy. The timing of everything. The banks, Stellar Media, Summit Cloud, it's too coordinated. You're paranoid, Derek said, taking another drink from the bottle. It's just a bad cycle. The market is correcting. We survived the launch, we survived the transition, and we'll survive this. I'll call Sebastian's office. Derek, Sophia paused, her voice suddenly small. Have you seen Lucy? Your sister? No. Why would I? She called me yesterday. She was hysterical. She said Ethan's lawyers filed an injunction against the house. They've frozen her accounts because of the property dispute. She wanted money. Did you give her any? Of course not, Sophia said, her voice returning to its usual icy composure. She's a liability now. If the press gets wind of the fact that her testimony 5 years ago was compensated, the civil suits alone will ruin us. I told her to change her number. Good, Derek said. We don't need dead weight. Let me handle Sebastian. By this time next week, we'll be under the Summit umbrella, and this whole mess will be someone else's problem. He hung up, the silence of the office settling back over him like dust. He picked up his desk phone and dialed a number he had spent 3 days securing from an intermediary. The line rang twice before a professional, clinical voice answered. The office of the Executive Vice President, Summit Holdings. How may I direct your call? Yes, Derek said, straightening his tie out of habit. My name is Derek Ford. I'm the CEO of Ford Tech. I'd like to schedule an urgent meeting with Mr. Sebastian Whitmore regarding a strategic acquisition opportunity. One moment, Mr. Ford. As the hold music, a sterile, computerized rendition of Bach, played through the receiver, Derek looked out at the city. The rain was hitting the glass harder, now blurring the lights of the financial district into long, bleeding streaks of gold and red. The private dining club on the 88th floor of the Summit Tower was a space designed to make men feel like gods. The walls were lined with dark Macassar ebony, the floors carpeted in thick, noise-dampening silk wool. Outside the massive glass panes, the clouds drifted past, so close they seemed within arm's reach. Sebastian Whitmore sat at the head of a long, polished obsidian table. He was 38, but his hair was already thinning, combed back with meticulous precision. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than a mid-level engineer's annual salary, and on his wrist was a rare platinum Patek Philippe A trophy from his first successful hostile takeover. Mr. Ford, Sebastian said, not looking up from his tablet as Derek and Sophia were ushered into the room by a steward. Mrs. Kane Ford, please sit. Derek sat, his posture stiff, his movements slightly too fast. Sophia sat beside him, her face a mask of elegant poise, though the slight tightness around her jaw betrayed her anxiety. Thank you for seeing us on such short notice, Mr. Whitmore, Derek began, opening a leather-bound folder. I believe you've had a chance to review the preliminary prospectus we sent over. Sebastian finally set the tablet down. His eyes were cold, calculating, and entirely devoid of the warmth his late father, Sterling, had been known for. I've looked at it, Sebastian said, pouring himself a glass of sparkling water. Ford Tech is in a precarious position. Your stock is down 45%. Your primary credit line is facing a margin call on Friday. And you've lost your largest client, which, ironically, was one of our subsidiaries. A temporary misunderstanding, Derek said quickly, his hands moving in tight, nervous gestures. The cancellation of the Summit Cloud data contract was a strategic error on their part. Our algorithm is the only system that can handle their high-frequency distribution without significant latency. If we merge that technology becomes proprietary to Summit, you'll save $300 million in development costs. Sebastian leaned back, his fingers interlaced. We've done our own valuation. Mr. Ford, your technology is indeed valuable, but your company is toxic. The market is smelling blood. If we buy you now, we buy your liabilities, your debt, and the impending lawsuits from your minority shareholders who feel they've been deluded out of their minds. Sophia spoke up, her voice smooth and measured. Mr. Whitmore, the market's reaction is temporary. Kane PR has already prepared a comprehensive crisis management campaign. Once the acquisition is announced, the narrative changes. From struggling startup to strategic expansion of Summit Holdings. The stock will rebound within 48 hours. We are offering you a 60% controlling stake for $250 million. Sebastian smiled, a thin, humorless movement of his lips. $250 million? Mrs. Kane, you overestimate your leverage. On Friday at 5 p.m. your banks will foreclose. By Monday morning, Ford Tech will be in bankruptcy court. I can buy your patents for 10 cents on the dollar during the liquidation sale. Derek's face went pale. Mr. Whitmore, if you let us go under, the core team will scatter. The developers who understand the architecture will leave. You'll get the code, but you won't have the minds that can implement it. We are offering you a turnkey solution. Sebastian remained silent for several seconds, letting the tension in the room build until the sound of the rain against the glass felt like a physical weight. $100 million, Sebastian said flatly. 70% equity. I take control of the board. You and your wife remain as non-voting executive consultants with a 3-year lockup period on your remaining shares. You use $80 million of that cash to satisfy the banks immediately. The remaining $20 million stays in the company as working capital. $100 million? Derek's voice cracked. That's barely enough to cover our personal guarantees on the loans. We'd be left with nothing but paper wealth that we can't liquidate for 3 years. Then don't take it, Sebastian said, picking up his tablet again. The doors are behind you. The elevator takes 30 seconds to reach the lobby. You have until Friday noon to sign the letter of intent. After that, the offer drops to $50 million. Sophia reached out under the table, her fingers digging into Derek's knee, warning him to stay silent. We need 24 hours to consult with our legal counsel, Mr. Whitmore. Sophia said, her voice steady despite the fury burning in her eyes. You have until tomorrow at 5 p.m., Sebastian said, not looking up. Good day, Mr. Ford. Mrs. Kane. The walk back to the elevator was silent. The air in the corridor felt cold, sterile, and indifferent. When the elevator doors closed, sealing them in the mahogany-lined cabin, Derek let out a breath that was half a sob. $100 million, he whispered, staring at the digital floor indicator as it descended. He's robbing us. He's taking the company I spent 5 years building for a fraction of its value. He's giving us a lifeline, Derek, Sophia said, her teeth clenched. We take the $100 million. We clear the personal debt. We keep our positions. Once we're inside Summit, we can find a way to rebuild our leverage. Sebastian isn't his father. He's arrogant, and arrogant men make mistakes. But 35% of that company was mine, Derek muttered, his eyes fixed on his reflection in the polished brass of the elevator door. If we hadn't had to restructure. Stop talking about Ethan, Sophia snapped. He's a ghost. He's gone. Focus on what's in front of us. The elevator chimed, the door sliding open to reveal the bustling lobby of the Summit Tower. As they walked toward the exit, a man in a dark gray mandarin collar suit passed them, heading toward the private executive elevators. He carried a black leather document bag. Derek stopped, frowning. Is that George? Who? Sophia asked, not stopping. George. Sterling Whitmore's old personal secretary, Derek said, turning to look back. I saw him at Sterling's funeral last year. What's he doing here? Sebastian fired him the day the old man died. Who cares? Sophia said, pulling him toward the rotating glass doors. He's probably here to collect his pension. Let's go, Derek. We have a contract to draft. Behind them, George stepped into the private elevator, scanned a VIP security card that bypassed the standard floor selection, and pressed the button for the penthouse suite. Not the 88th floor where Sebastian sat, but the 99th floor, the private offices of the chairman of the Summit Trust. The elevator climbed silently, leaving the city behind. The annual Metropolis Business Summit was the premier corporate event of the year. Held at the Grand Century Convention Center, it gathered 3,000 of the country's top executives, venture capitalists, and political figures. The main exhibition hall was a sea of glass booths, blue LED lights, and high-definition screens displaying corporate slogans about the future of synergistic innovation. For Derek and Sophia, the summit was their final stand. The letter of intent with Sebastian Whitmore had been signed that morning. The press release was scheduled to be blasted to the wires at 7 p.m., right before the keynote addresses began. They stood near the entrance of the main ballroom, holding glasses of champagne they hadn't touched. Sophia wore a deep emerald green silk gown, her diamonds catching the light of the chandeliers. Derek had spent an hour in front of the mirror, ensuring his tie was straight and his expression was one of calm, victorious confidence. Once the announcement drops, the stock will halt for 20 minutes, Derek whispered, his eyes scanning the crowd. When it resumes, the shorts will cover. We'll be safe. Look professional, Sophia murmured, greeting a passing investor with a warm, practiced smile. We are partners with Summit now. We need to project that authority. At the far end of the ballroom, a commotion began. The crowd of executives and journalists parted, creating a natural corridor. A group of men in dark suits walked through, their movements synchronized, their expressions solemn. At the center of the group was Sebastian Whitmore. He walked with the easy grace of a man who owned the room, nodding occasionally to the greetings shouted from the crowd. But he wasn't looking at the investors. He was looking toward the VIP terrace at the back of the hall. Derek and Sophia followed his gaze. Standing on the elevated terrace, holding a simple glass of water, was a man in a bespoke navy blue suit. His hair was cut short, his posture relaxed but perfectly upright. He didn't wear jewelry, not even a watch. But the cut of his suit, the quiet confidence of his stance, and the way the security detail of the convention center stood 5 paces behind him, keeping the crowd at bay, spoke of a power that didn't need to shout. It was Ethan Hayes. Derek's glass of champagne slipped from his fingers, shattering on the polished marble floor. The sound was lost in the ambient noise of the ballroom, but for Sophia, the world seemed to go silent. Ethan, she breathed, her face turning a pale, sickly white. What is he doing here? Derek's voice was high, frantic. How did he get past security? This is a private event. You need an invitation from the executive committee. As they watched, Sebastian Whitmore reached the steps of the terrace. He didn't look up with his usual arrogance. Instead, his posture was tense, his hands clasped in front of him in a gesture that looked remarkably like submission. Mr. Hayes, Sebastian said, his voice carrying over the quieted section of the terrace. The board is assembled in the private dining room. We're ready for your signature on the restructuring documents. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He took a slow sip of his water, his eyes scanning the ballroom until they locked onto Derek and Sophia. His gaze was calm. No anger, no triumph, no hatred. It was the look of an auditor reviewing a spreadsheet that had finally balanced. Let's do it here, Sebastian, Ethan said, his voice quiet but perfectly clear. The light is better. George stepped forward from the shadow of the terrace pillars, carrying a leather folder and a heavy soapstone seal. He set them on the high-top table, beside Ethan. What is this? Derek shouted, pushing past a group of startled tech executives, his composure entirely gone. Sebastian, what the hell is going on? We signed the letter of intent this morning. Ford Tech is part of Summit. Sebastian turned around, his face tight with embarrassment and a cold, clinical detachment. Mr. Ford, Sebastian said, his tone dry. The letter of intent you signed was with Summit Cloud Data, a subsidiary of Summit Holdings. This afternoon, the majority shareholder of Summit Holdings Offshore Parent Trust executed a proxy vote, removing me from my position as chairman of the executive committee. Derek stopped, his mind refusing to process the words. Majority shareholder? Your father had 80% of the trust. You inherited it. My father, Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a whisper, left his entire personal estate, including the primary offshore trusts that control 52% of Summit Holdings voting stock, to a designated beneficiary. He turned back to look at Ethan, to Mr. Hayes. The silence that fell over the immediate area was absolute. Sophia felt her knees weaken, her fingers gripping the brass railing of the terrace to keep from falling. $180 billion. The number she had dismissed, the rumors of a massive hidden trust that the financial world had whispered about for a year. It wasn't a myth. It was the old man's final, silent vengeance against the son who had locked him away. And he had given it to the man who had shared his cell, who had kept him warm, who had treated him like a human being when everyone else had written him off as a relic. Ethan picked up the soapstone seal. He looked at Derek, whose eyes were wide with a terror so profound he couldn't even speak. Derek, Ethan said, his voice steady. 5 years ago you told me that in business the only thing that matters is who owns the ink. He pressed the seal into the red wax on the document. Immovable as mountains. The ink dried instantly. The board of Summit Holdings has officially rejected the acquisition of Ford Tech, Ethan said, handing the document to George. Furthermore, as the primary creditor of your partner banks, Summit has purchased your outstanding debt. The margin call remains active. You have until 5 p.m. tomorrow to pay $40 million. Ethan, please. Sophia stepped forward, her voice trembling, her hands reaching out in a gesture of desperate, hollow supplication. We were partners. Once. We can talk about this. The 35%. We can restore it. We can make you the CEO. We can. Mrs. Kane, Ethan interrupted her, his tone devoid of any emotion. Your firm, Kane PR, has been found in breach of contract with Stellar Media for failing to deliver the agreed-upon campaigns. The liquidated damages clause has been triggered. The court-ordered freeze on your corporate accounts was approved 30 minutes ago. He looked at his stopwatch, then back at them. The ledger is closed, Ethan said. He turned his back on them, walking toward the private exit of the terrace, George and his security detail falling in behind him. Derek took 2 steps forward, his hand reaching out as if he could pull the world back to how it was 5 years ago. Ethan, you can't do this. I built that company. It's my code. No, Derek. Ethan's voice came back to him, quiet and final as the heavy wooden doors of the VIP exit began to close. It was always my code. The fall of an empire is rarely loud. It is the sound of paper tearing, of phones ringing in empty rooms, of a car door shutting in the dark. By Friday afternoon, the offices of Ford Tech were nearly empty. The developers had gone home early, realizing their paychecks for the next cycle would likely bounce. The desks were littered with half-empty coffee cups, discarded printouts, and the quiet, steady hum of computer fans cooling servers that were no longer receiving queries. Derek sat on the floor of his office, his back against the mahogany desk. On the table above him, the formal notice of receivership sat under the weight of his empty glass. The banks had filed for Chapter 11 liquidation at exactly 4 p.m. after the $40 million payment failed to materialize. His personal assets, his penthouse, his Maybach, his accounts in Zurich had been frozen under the terms of the personal guarantees he had signed to secure the initial loans. The door to his office opened. Sophia walked in. She was still wearing her emerald green gown from the night before, but the fabric was wrinkled, the hem dirty from the streets. Her makeup was smudged, her hair loose and messy around her shoulders. She didn't look like the youngest female CEO of a publicly traded company anymore. She looked like someone who had spent the night walking the city, looking for a door that wasn't locked. They've taken the house, she said, her voice flat, devoid of any pitch. The lawyers said the authorized disposal document I used to transfer Ethan's half to Lucy was forged. The notary has confessed to taking a $10,000 bribe from Derek's shell company. Derek didn't look up. We still have the offshore accounts, Sophia. The ones in the Cayman Islands. We can leave. We can start over. The Cayman accounts are gone, Derek, she said, sitting on the floor beside him, her head leaning against the desk. The beneficial owner of the holding company that managed those accounts wasn't us. It was a subsidiary of the Summit Trust. They didn't steal the money. They just invoked the default clauses on our corporate debt and seized the assets to satisfy the creditors. She let out a short, dry laugh. We don't have $1 left, Derek. Not one. The silence of the empty office settled over them, heavy and cold. In the corner, the television screen, left onto a financial news channel on mute, displayed a scrolling banner. Summit Holdings announces restructuring. Ethan Hayes appointed chairman of the board. Below it, a smaller headline ran. Ford Tech shares suspended from trading pending bankruptcy proceedings. He didn't even use a gun, Derek whispered, his fingers tracing the pattern of the wood grain on the floor. He just used the rules we wrote. No, Sophia said, closing her eyes. He used the rules his cellmate wrote. We thought we were playing chess with a boy we'd beaten. We didn't realize we were playing with the man who owned the board. The cemetery was located on a hill overlooking the northern outskirts of the city, far from the glass towers of the financial district. The rain had stopped, leaving the grass wet and green, the air smelling of clean earth and damp pine needles. Ethan stood before a simple headstone made of gray granite. There was no large monument, no gold lettering, no lists of titles or accomplishments. Just 2 words and 2 dates. Sterling Whitmore 1948 to 2025. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the soapstone seal. He set it on top of the headstone, the cool stone clicking against the granite. It's done, Sterling, Ethan said quietly. Behind him, the soft sound of footsteps on the gravel path broke the silence. George walked up, carrying a simple wool coat over his arm. He didn't speak. Immediately, standing a respectful pace behind Ethan, his head slightly bowed. Mr. Hayes, George said after a moment. The transition is complete. The board has approved the new corporate charter. Sebastian has agreed to a non-disclosure settlement and has left the country. He'll be living on a fixed pension in Switzerland. He won't be returning. And the sister? Ethan asked, not turning around. Lucy has taken a job as a clerk in a small town 3 hours north, George said. The house has been sold. The proceeds have been donated to the prison library fund as per your instructions. Ethan nodded slowly. What about Derek and Sophia? The district attorney's office has opened a formal investigation into the security restructuring of Ford Tech and the subsequent transfer of your shares. George said, his voice level. Given the evidence we provided regarding the forged notary documents and the compensated testimony of your sister, the charges will likely include conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, and corporate embezzlement. Their lawyers are advising them to plead guilty. Ethan looked out over the city. The sun was beginning to break through the clouds, casting long, golden shafts of light across the distant skyscrapers. From this height, the city looked small, quiet, and remarkably clean. George, Ethan said. Yes, Mr. Hayes? Do you know why I didn't change the watch? He lifted his left arm, showing the stopped face of the watch he had worn the day he went in. The hands were frozen at exactly 3 p.m. I don't, sir. Because when you're inside, time doesn't move, Ethan said, his voice soft. Every day is the same day. Every night is the same night. You live in a space where the past is the only thing that's real. He lowered his hand, his fingers resting on the cold granite of Sterling's headstone. But today, Ethan said, the watch is just a watch. He turned and walked down the path, his steps steady, his head held high. George followed him, leaving the soapstone seal resting on the gray granite, its carved characters catching the afternoon sun, immovable as mountains.